We're back on Inside USA, coming to you this week from the San Francisco Bay. In a moment, more of my interview with prison abolitionist Angela Davis. But first, here's Richard Gisbert, an election post.
With the race for the White House heating up as the U.S. economy threatens to melt down, here at the Election Post, we couldn't help but notice that one of the lessons that the candidates are learning is that they may be able to sidestep the scrutiny of mainstream news media from time to time, but there's no escaping the sharp wit of American satirical media and their take on politics.
The big story continues to be economic meltdown. For anybody out there who's been living in a cave, let me just say this: congratulations. You've apparently made the soundest real estate investment possible. Once again, Bin Laden wins.
Explain your claim that you have foreign policy experience based on Alaska's proximity to Russia.
Every morning when Alaskans wake up, one of the first things they do is look outside to see if there are any Russians hanging around.
It's not just news channels riding U.S. politics to high ratings.
Long before anyone even thought of invading Iraq, I wanted to add more troops in case we ever did invade.
The viewing numbers for Saturday Night Live, the long-running NBC comedy show, are also up an astonishing 46%.
The campaign, and especially in this season, provides a lot of fodder for a lot of the comedy shows. Saturday Night Live just came into production this month, and Sarah Palin has proven to be a ratings boon to them.
You went to the UN for the first time. How was that experience?
So many interesting people, though I have to say I was disheartened by how many of them were foreigners.
Time out!
Jon Stewart, he and Stephen Colbert, those guys live off of politics, and the campaign has been a never-ending gift to those guys.
Tomorrow morning, I'll suspend my campaign and return to Washington.
I, for one, cannot think of anything more presidential than suspending your presidential campaign.
Politics are sort of fundamentally funny just because they're fundamentally so chaotic, and by virtue of running a presidential campaign, you're giving all sorts of material to the whole genre of shows that make fun of American politics.
He's suspending it to focus on the economy, this crisis. I thought that's what the campaign was about.
Humor is funniest when it really has a target and figures out a way to lampoon that target.
John McCain certainly won the debate on foreign policy.
The average South Korean is 3 inches taller than the average North Korean.
Exactly!
The segments that I like the best are the ones where I feel like not only are they really funny, but they really expose candidates for some of the hypocrisies that just develop over time.
People aren't just watching, they're taking it in. A survey conducted during the 2004 campaign concluded that 21% of Americans aged 18 to 29 cited The Daily Show and Saturday Night Live as places they regularly learned about political news. And there are even more satirical offerings on the air now.
Kind of straightforward cable news shows are so unwatchable now. People are turning to something that has information content, but is also not incredibly painful to watch.
And other non-news television shows are packing a journalistic punch as well. The View is a daytime talk show on ABC aimed at stay-at-home female viewers. Recently, when John McCain was peddling lies in his campaign ads about Barack Obama, news channels used all kinds of euphemisms to describe what the Republican candidate was doing. The women on The View pulled no such punches.
We know that those two ads are untrue, they're lies, and yet you at the end of it say, I approve these messages. Do you really approve them?
Actually, they're not lies.
When politicians go in a place like The View, they're expecting to get a lot of softballs thrown at them. When they're caught off guard, as McCain was, when the women on The View started peppering him and saying, hey, you're lying in your campaign ads. Now, that's probably the last thing he expected to hear on there.
However, politicians are having to come to terms with the fact that non-journalists like comedy and talk show hosts are often in a better position to play hardball with the candidates than real journalists are.
The way CNN works and other cable news networks is they need guests, and those guests are political guests. In order to get access to those guests, they have to be, quote-unquote, neutral to both parties. Well, The View can easily do a show without John McCain or any other politician ever coming on. So they don't have to give soft coverage for access. They can actually tell people the truth, the reality. They can do some real news reporting.
And just like they mock the candidates, the talk show hosts and comedians can often send up the mainstream media when they fail to provide real news reporting.
Obviously, Fox News is a more sophisticated analysis network and understands why Governor Palin would be ready from day one.
But the other thing about her, she does know about international relations because she is right up there in Alaska, right next door to Russia.
We'll be back closer to Election Day with more on the campaign coverage here at the Election Post.
We're back in Oakland with my conversation with Angela Davis. You've written and spoken a lot over the years about prison abolition, which is a fairly radical idea if you actually take it to mean the closing of all prisons in the United States.
Well, it's actually much more complicated than that, and I should say that it means a lot more than tearing down prisons. It means building up new institutions. So we say that, of course, we have to dismantle the prison industrial complex, but in order to do that, we have to address all of those problems that are responsible for such large numbers of people being in prison. And we take our cue from the abolitionist movement in relation to slavery. The problem with that abolitionist movement, as important as it was that it only addressed the negative side of abolition. And therefore, the institution was dismantled, but the institutions were not created that would allow former slaves to participate fully in a democratic society.
So you're talking about education, you're talking about housing, you're talking
Absolutely. So in a sense, we're still working with the issue of abolishing slavery. In a sense, we're still living with the residues and the sediments and the memories and the inheritances of slavery.
What is it in the prison system that you feel echoes or even embodies the legacy of slavery in the United States?
Well,
because still, most people think you commit a crime, you get convicted, you go to jail. It's part of having a functioning democracy and an orderly society.
But that's not true, because many people commit crimes and never end up going to jail. Huge numbers of people who are not subject to this apparatus of surveillance, and I can't be clearer about that. If you look at the fact that huge numbers of people behind bars are illiterate, that tells you something about the role that the lack of education plays in determining who goes to prison and who doesn't. This is why I say we're living with the inheritances of slavery, because had these institutions been seriously created in the aftermath of slavery, had equal citizenship, to talk about the civil rights movement, been created, we would not have had the need for, the civil rights movement wouldn't have been necessary 100 years later, right? But we're dealing with, well, in a sense, you might say it's a kind of demand for reparation, but a much more complicated idea of reparations from slavery.
Not a cash payment.
Not a cash payment, but the creation of those institutions that ought to have been established, back in the 1800s, in the aftermath of the negative abolition of slavery.
How much cheap labor is provided by the prison complex in the United States today? All done for a fraction of the minimum wage.
Exactly.
How widespread is?
It's very widespread, extremely widespread. And you might say that prisoners need to work, because work, if it is fulfilling, can play a major role in, if one wants to talk about rehabilitation. But the fact is that that whether this labor is controlled directly by the state or the prison system, or whether private corporations are brought in to use prison labor, the amount of money prisoners make is a pittance. But there's one other point that I want to make in this connection, and that is the rise of the globalized prison. and the extent to which the prison has become the face of a peculiar American form of democracy. When we think about the war on terror, we think about Abu Ghraib, we think about Guantanamo, we think about all of the private, all of the clandestine, hidden prisons of the CIA. We see new prisons on the, constructed on the American model using U.S. practices and regimes in Africa. We see them in Asia. We see them in Latin America. And again, it is about containing surplus populations, populations that no longer have a place under the under the regime of global capitalism.
Angela, we're out of time, but thank you so much for talking to us today.
Thank you very much.